The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar session. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you are on the planet. Today, we will be doing the series Custom Formulas and Indicators. This is part number 2. So we did have part number 1 running last month in June, sorry. And at this time, in this particular series, we are talking about creating custom formulas and indicators using Microsoft Project. During today's session, we will be learning how to create a critical path indicator in Microsoft Project. My name is Rafael Santos, and I am a Microsoft Project MVP and a principal consultant here at Sensei Project Solutions. So I will be your host for today's session. Welcome, and I hope that we can have some fun together. So before we get started, I would like to do a quick introduction about myself. As I said, my name is Rafael Santos. I am currently working as a principal consultant at Sensei Project Solutions, and I am running my third time or my third turn as a Microsoft Project MVP. So we are 35, almost 35 Microsoft MVPs in the entire world, and I am one of them alongside with my colleague Dale Howard, which is another MVP for Microsoft Project that works for Sensei. I have been participating in projects to adopt and implement the PPM platform. So I had previous experiences working in Africa. I lived in Africa for about 4 years, I believe. Also, I have had the opportunity to work in projects here in my country in South America, where I am from. I'm from Brazil. And I am now, since I have joined Sensei, I'm now working with clients based in North America. So as I said, I'm based in São Paulo, Brazil, and very sad because we didn't win the World Cup. So kudos to France for achieving that. And if you would like to reach out to me, if there's any questions, if there are any comments or anything that you'd like to discuss with me after this presentation, you please feel free to reach out to me at rafael.santos at senseiprojectsolutions.com. Before we get started, I would like to just quickly introduce Sensei. So for any of you who do not know about us, we are Microsoft's gold partner for project and portfolio management. We have been nominated as the 2014 PPM Partner of the Year award, so we were winners in 2014, and we made it to the final, so we have been finalists in both 2015, 2017, and also this year 2018. So we have a previous experience. We have been working with more than 500 Microsoft PPM deployments all across the globe. We have had a portfolio of more than 5,000 users trained, both Microsoft project managers, both project managers who use Microsoft Project and Project Online, as well as team members, administrators, portfolio managers, executives, and all the all the users that really use Project Online and Project Server. So we do have global impact, and we are very pleased to be hosting this webinar today. So just to talk a little bit what we work and what we do. So Sensei works with 4 pillars, so 4 different platforms, I would say, or building blocks. So we do provide services, solutions, trainings, and apps. So when it comes to services, we do PPM consulting and managed support. We also have a couple of solutions that help companies get started with Project Online and achieve their strategic goals through work and project management. So we have the Jumpstart solution, Report Packs, Integration Hub, Reporting Hub, Agile solution, and also our Power BI content pack for Project Online. We do have training, both the on-site and the e-learning trainings, so multiple options for you. And we also have a couple of apps that help speed up your utilization of Project Online and Project Server. So if you would like to know more about us, you can just visit senseiprojectsolutions.com. If you are already a client of us, a customer of us, we appreciate all your business. So now we will get started with our webinar, so with today's session. And during this session, we will be talking about custom formulas and indicators, as I previously previously said. So we have delivered the part number 1. So the first session was discovering the percent of schedule variance. In this session, we discussed how to calculate in percentage what's the size of the variance that we have for our schedule. If you didn't have the opportunity to watch this session, just send me an email and I can send you the link so this session has been recorded and you can watch it on demand. So today we will cover the critical path indicator. So we will create a critical path indicator. And in September, we will do part number 3. So please pay attention that we are not going to have a session to discuss custom formulas and indicators next month in August. Instead, the session will run in September. So you can just block your agenda, and in there, we will discuss how to create governance KPIs for your schedule. So you can just visit senseiprojectsolutions.com/webinars, and in there you have all of the information. So before we get started, let's just talk about the basics. So for those of you who didn't have the opportunity to watch the previous session, we got that started talking on how does project calculate a schedule variance. So Microsoft Project uses a field called finish variance, and this finish is responsible to store or to calculate the schedule variance. So the schedule variance in Microsoft Project is stored in the finish variance, and the formula used to do this calculation is finish, so the current finish date that we have minus the baseline finish. So as soon as we have defined our baseline, we can just go ahead and get started executing the project and collecting all of the information. And every time in which there is a discrepancy or in which there is a difference between our current finish date and the date that we have defined that's stored in the baseline finish, the finish variance field is going to present us what's the size of that particular variance. So that's very important because we need to understand where this information is stored, since we will be using this particular field in all of our calculations. One more thing that I would like to just share with you guys is that if you do have any questions, if you do have any comments, if there's anything that you'd like to ask, you can use the chat window and post your question. I will be reading all of them here. We will be providing you with some answers. So let's move on. As I said, all of the information in terms of variance is stored in the schedule variance, in the finish variance field. And one question that we always get from our customers, from people who are getting started with project, from people who are using project in their day-to-day activity is, how can we understand how big is our variance? Because this is a very important concept that we need to understand in order to define how we are going to classify or how we are going to put our KPIs together, right? So we may have a task that has, for example, 10 days of variance. If I only have this information, 10 days of variance, is this good? Is this bad? So how is that particular size of the variance? How are those particular 10 days affecting my project, right? So one question that we always get is, how do I calculate the percentage so then I can really understand how big it is? Because sometimes we have 10 days that will mean 1% of variance. Sometimes we will have one day that represents 50% of variance when we talk about the schedule itself, the project itself. So this is a very important concept that we need to understand. And when we understand that, and this has been explained in the previous session, as I said, I will be sharing some links with you about the particular initial session. So when we understand that, what the next step that people take is, all right, I know that I do know now what's the size of my variance, so then I will be applying the simple rule of the percent of variance. So, based on this, in the majority of times, people will do something like this. So, if the percentage of variance, if the percent of variance is greater than 10%, then I would like to show the red icon, the red circle that will define that, if my variance is greater than 10%, then it's pretty bad, and I would like to show that particular task in red. Then we may say if the percent of variance is in between 1 and 10%, right, that's not that bad. Let's put that in yellow, so then we do have a warning that says, you have some variance in here, but this is something that you can still manage. So let's put that in yellow. And then we have tasks in our schedule that will have no variance at all, or the variance is going to be negative, right? So we are, for example, finishing the task ahead of the planning date. So if that's the case, then we show this in green. So that's a pretty nice rule. I can, understand that that's a rule that we can apply based on the size of the variance in percentage. However, the point will be, what if we do have a scenario like this? So I do have my schedule in here with my collection of tasks, but for some reason, this task goes a little bit further. So if I am not delivering this task at the time I was planning, I will do have a variance in here, right? And let's say that after calculating this into my schedule, I discover that the size of variance is 50%. So if we follow the rule that we have defined, which is the percentage of variance, this task is basically going to be showing with the red icon, just because it's greater than 10%. So anything that's greater than 10% will be considered as a very bad variance to our schedule. However, there is a point that we need to consider here, which is this task, even though it has a variance that's greater than 10%, is this task affecting the date in which we have planned to deliver the project? In this particular case, as we can see in this drawing that I made here, it's not the case. And the reason is because this is not a critical task. So if this task is not in the critical path, it has a margin, I would say, or a slack in which it can slip a little bit without moving on the finishing date of the project. And for those particular and in this particular scenario, why should we point this task as red if this task is not doing any bad, or it's not moving on, or moving ahead the finish date of the project? So that's the entire point of the critical rule, or of the critical path rule. So the critical path rule, which is a rule that I do prefer to use in my project, it takes into consideration if the task has variance and if the task is in the critical path. So if I see any variance in the task, and it doesn't matter if the percentage of variance is 1% or if it is 10% or 50%, it doesn't matter. If we do have a variance in my schedule and this task is in the critical path, then I should show this as red. In the other hand, if I do have a task that has variance, but the task is not in the critical path, then I should have a warning telling me that there is something wrong with this particular task because it has a variance. However, this variance is not yet affecting the finishing date of the project. So therefore, it should be, just showing a yellow warning just for me to pay attention to this, but it should not distract me from what is important. And of course, if the task has no variance, then we should be displaying this in green. So the next slide here will provide us with this particular scenario. So for example, we still have that particular task with 50% of variance. However, that particular task is not in the critical path. So, we can deal with that. However, the last task in our schedule now also has a variance, but this variance is smaller if compared to the previous one. It's only 5% of variance. However, that particular 5% of variance is pushing our schedule ahead. So if this happens, it's going to basically do not allow us to deliver our project in the date we have planned to do so, and that should be 50% of variance in a critical path. Oh, in a non-critical task would be something we can manage. However, this would be something that we have to manage because this is not allowing us, as I said, to deliver the project on time. So let's do some demonstration now. I will do a hands-on in which I will be moving to project desktop, and we will be putting this in place. So I will be moving on to project here. I do have a schedule that I have just created for this demonstration. So it's not a real schedule with real tasks, just a bunch of tasks for us to simulate some calculations here. And as we can see, I do have my percentage of schedule variance here, which is a column that I already created because I used this schedule, this project in the previous presentation. So I'm just using the previous presentation or the previous schedule that has been used in the previous presentation. So we do have a project schedule variance. The reason I do not have any variance at all is because I do not have a baseline set. So my baseline set. So let me clear my baseline. Let me clear this one, right? And let me set a new baseline. We have agreed upon all of the tasks here, all of the dates and the resource utilization. So I will set a baseline. And as we do not have any variance, then that's not going to be a problem, right? So let's say that this particular task here, prepare the farm servers. I'll click on format and I will just ask Microsoft Project to highlight the critical tasks. So all the critical tasks are going to be highlighted here. And let's say that I have this task, which is prepare the farm servers. And the PPM consultant is the one responsible for this task. But let's say that if we go to the details of this task, we can see that the PPM consultant is assigned with 100% of his time to do this task, which means that a 40-hour task will take 5 days to be completed. But let's say that we have received an information that this PPM consultant is also working in a different project, and we need to change his units because for this particular task, he's only going to be available to work 50% of his time. So instead of dedicating 8 hours a day to deliver this task, he's only going to be dedicating 50% of his time, which means 40 hours a day. 4 hours a day, not 40, 4 hours a day. So I will change his units to 50%. I will click OK. And that's basically going to cause us a very big issue because we will have a variance for this particular task, which is 100% of variance. Just because we are taking 2 weeks or 10 days to deliver the task, when we have planned this to be just 1 week. So the planning was taking into consideration 100% of utilization of the PPM consultant, and therefore it was planned to happen in 1 day, in 5 days. So now we have 100% of variance. If we were using the percentage of variance rule, this task would show us red right away. So it would not give us any chance, and it would show this task as red. But this task is not ready yet because we do have some margin for this task to slip a little bit, because this task is not in a critical path, as we can see. So that's the reason the critical path rule would be very useful here. So let me go ahead and create this field. So we are going to create this field together, and we can see which are the considerations that we take. So I will click here on custom project and then custom fields. I will use the text field. So text 1 is free. I can rename this, and I will say critical path indicator, or KPI, to be easier. And I will change this instead of being none to a formula. And the formula that we need to use is a function that is a general function, and we will be using the if function. So if you have never created formulas in Microsoft Project, I will share some good articles that you can get started with. So here I'm doing a more advanced formula. So the first thing that we need to be sure is that our project has a baseline. So if the project doesn't have a baseline, then no calculation needs to be applied, right? So what I am going to be doing is I will be bringing in and replacing this expression portion of the formula with a field that comes from date, and then it's going to be the baseline finish date. And I will just take the baseline finish 0. And I will say if baseline finish is equals to, and then I will use another function, which is a Microsoft project function, a function called project date value. So the project date value converts a date into a text, because the baseline finish is a date field, but I will be using here in the expression a text. So that's the reason I have to use the project date value. So then it converts the date into a text. And I will say if the baseline finish equals to NA, because when we do not have a baseline, the value is stored in this particular field by Microsoft Project is NA, which means not available. So if the baseline finish equals to NA, it means we do not have a baseline. So I will put an answer here saying no baseline. It's going to be pretty simple. However, if we do have a baseline, then the calculation needs to be done. So in the false part, instead of typing anything, I will put another function, and it's going to be another if function. And I will just go ahead and create my rule for the critical path. So what we need to make sure is there a variance? So in order to discover if there is a variance, we need to go to the field and then date, and then under date, we have the finish variance field here. So if the finish variance is greater than 0, and because we need to do a combination and check if the task is in the critical path. So if the finish variance is greater than 0 and the task is critical, is in the critical path, and we can get this through the flag grouping. So we have the critical here. So if this combination happens, if the task has variance, or if the finish variance is greater than 0 and the task is in the critical path, then the true part of the expression will be, let's say, critical variance. Now we need to check if the task has variance but is not in the critical path. So I will be putting another function, and it's going to be another if function. So let's go to project or to general again, and then if again. And we are just going to do kind of the same. So if finish variance is greater than 10, greater than 0, sorry. But here, the, 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 the beauty of this is we do not need to specify the non-critical because we only have two options when we are using the critical path tasks. There are tasks in the critical path and there are tasks which are not part of the critical path. So in here we dealt with the critical tasks, which means that if we are here in this portion, the tasks are no longer critical. So I do not need to say if uh, finish variance greater than 0 and not in critical path, because this is the opposite of what we have done previously. So I will say non-critical variance, and the false part is going to be for the tasks that do not have variance at all, so I will say no variance. All right, so that's our formula. I will just click OK, and project should just do the calculation for me. Then I will use the formula here. So then I can basically replicate this formula to all of my summary rows and then use the graphical indicators. So I will say if the value that's the result of that particular formula is no baseline, so if it returns no baseline, then I will show my white icon, for example. If the result is equals to critical variance, then I will change here and say it's going to be red because this task is in the critical path and has a variance, so that's very important for me. If the value equals to non-critical variance, then it's going to be yellow because I need to be warned. And if I do not have variance, it should just be green. So that's fine. I can replicate this information to my summary rows and also to the project summary row. I can click OK, and my formula is going to be there. If you are wondering if I'm going to share this with you guys, definitely I will share this with you. So just send me an email. I can share the formula with you. I can click OK, then OK again. And as soon as we add a new column, which is our critical path KPI, we will be seeing that that particular task in which we have the variance, even though the variance is a 100% variance, as the task is not in the critical path, it's going to be yellow, and that's nice. So let's say that we have this task here, which is configure SQL Server network settings. Let's do the same thing. So let's say instead of being 6 days, it's going to be 6.5 days for some reason. So my variance is going to be 8.33%. It's not greater than 10 as our variance rule that's based on the percentage. However, since this variance, since this task is in the critical path, it's going to be red because this task is affecting or is impacting the finishing date of our project. So the finish date that we have planned is not being respected. And because of this, we need to be aware that this is causing a very serious problem for our project. So that's the way the critical path KPI works, and that's the concept that we use for the critical path KPI in Project Desktop. I will check here to see if there are questions, comments, so then I can answer them. Let's just have a look and see if we do have questions. So, okay, so I have a question here coming from S. Beckford. He's asking, or she's asking, if we do have to add a value for the critical when we create the formula. That's a very good question indeed. The answer is we do not have to say critical equal yes or something like that, because Critical is always pointing to yes, so the default answer is always yes. Okay, so the way the flag is set up is criticals are always yes, so then we do not need to specify critical equals to yes. So that's basically the reason we do not need to do any specification here. And as we can see, we have all of the values here. It's working perfectly. So for the tasks, we do not have variance; they are green. For the tasks, we have variances and are in the critical path; they are uh, red. And for those who we do, for the tasks in which we do have variances but are not in the critical path, they are yellow. Let's see. I believe we do have some more questions. All right. So just quick information here. So that's it, everybody. I hope that this presentation was useful. I hope that you have enjoyed this, and this is a new concept that you may apply to your projects. Just going back here to the slide deck, there are some additional links. I will be sharing this slide deck at the end of the presentation. Just ping me, send me an email, and I can share the presentation, the slide deck with you. This is going to go with the formula that we have used, as well as the additional links for you to study. And I just would like to say a big thank you for you to dedicate some time to join me today. As I said, I hope that you have enjoyed this session. Remember that we have sessions every month here at Sensei. So you just go to Sensei projectsolutions.com/webinars and we'll see the full list of scheduled sessions. So I hope that the next sessions that are coming on in the next months are helpful. And I hope to see you soon in our next sessions here. So thank you very much. And if you do have questions, as I said, my email address is just here, rafael.santos@senseiprojectsolutions.com. So just reach out and we can keep up this discussion. So just one more question I'm seeing here. Right, thank you. Viva Brazil. Yeah, we didn't make it to the World Cup this year, but we are hoping to do this 2022. So thank you guys, and I hope to see you soon. Bye bye.